This is the Law School Show.
What's going on, Rish?
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks a lot for all your support and listening to the podcast. We truly appreciate it. And especially a shout out to everybody who helps us put these episodes together. Thanks a lot for your continued support.
Big thanks for sure. Check it out on iTunes. Take it with you. All the back episodes, 1 through the current. Today, great story, man. What a great talk we had with Steve Birken.
It was a very humbling and a candid conversation that we had with Steve. Probably one of the best interviews we have brought to you.
Absolutely. I loved it. Steve is in third year law school and does not have an articling position. He went through the second year OCI process, had in-firm interviews. He talks all about those. And he talks about his perspective of it. And he talks about the way he felt after realizing that he didn't land the job. He went through the articling recruitment. Same story there. In firms, discusses the process and how he felt afterwards not having a job. And he sums up by giving some pointers and talking about how he's approaching landing an articling position while going through his third year of academics. This is, people are going to be able to relate to this story.
So without further talk from us, let's not hold you guys back anymore. Here is the Law School Show.
What's up, guys? Good, what is this, Wednesday morning? It's moving into late fall, but we're chatting with Steve Birken, going to get the lowdown on what it means to go through OCIs, what it means to go through articles, and not land a job. See how that feels when you're sitting in third year. Take it right from the source. So we're looking forward to the chat. Steve's right here. We got Rish, my man, am I right, as well. So Steve, tell us a little bit about who you are, man. What you do in your undergrad? What are you into outside of law school?
All right, guys, thanks for having me. I did my undergrad at Wilfrid Laurier. I did it in business, so I do have a BBA. I do have a background in business. I also have a musical background. Music's always been a really big part of my life. I play guitar. I absolutely love it. And pretty much here I am. That's what led me to Ottawa.
Have you played in bands? Did you tour around Canada or play in the US or anything?
So, I've played in a lot of different places. I used to do a lot of gigging in high school. That's where the majority of my playing was done. I played in Vegas at the Mandalay Bay Hotel.
Wow.
I played in LA. I actually played on a cruise ship over the summer. So I've seen a few places. Yeah. That's for sure.
So it's legit.
Yeah, I like to think so.
So what we'll do in this interview is we'll break it down from first year law school to second year law school and then eventually to your articling experience that you had or the interview process for articling. So can you speak a bit about your first year experience in law school? What did you do and how was your first year summers?
So first year, I'm sure like most students will tell you, is definitely a transitional year. You go from your undergrad, which wherever that may come from, to law school, which is definitely a big difference. And a lot of students generally find that there's a few hurdles that they have to overcome. It's just a different way of studying. It's a different way of understanding material. Exams, a lot of people don't have any experience writing 100% exams, so that's generally a really stressful experience for students. Coming from a business background, I think I had a pretty good idea of what to expect because I had encountered a lot of this type of studying and analysis, right? In law school, it's very analytical. There's a lot of application-based testing, which is also very similar to business. But for students that come from a variety or an assortment of different backgrounds, trying to wrap your head around thinking that way is a struggle. So first year for sure definitely is transitional. It takes you a little bit of time before you understand how to read and how to handle the workload that's given to you, because it's an immense workload. The exam process for your first semester, where you have that first set of exams, very stressful. It's a lot of pressure, but you know what? It's something that everybody has to do. So that was one of the things that got me through, just knowing and understanding that it's not just me that's in this position. Everybody else is dealing with the exact same stuff.
Yeah.
Did you, when you came into law school, did you want to work in like a Bay Street law firm? Is that where your goal was to do corporate law, or that evolved as you've gone through law school?
Yeah, so my goal was always to try and combine both my interests in business and law. So before I even got into law school, I knew I was going to try and keep that business background at the top of mind. So once I eventually got into law school, and it stayed with me pretty much up until this point, I do want to try and combine those interests, and I want to do something corporate business related.
Did you do any extracurriculars first year?
Yeah, so in first year they give you the opportunity to do a moot. So I did do the first year moot. And that's also a very interesting experience because there's definitely times where you have to bunker down and it's really stressful because you have all this work dedicated to the moot while also the immense workload that comes with law school.
Right.
But it's a worthwhile experience. It gives you an understanding, definitely, of how litigation sort of works, and whether or not the moot covers areas that you're interested in. It's still beneficial because it helps you in your courses because you're doing similar work in a lot of the courses that you have to do.
Do you do anything else?
I also volunteered with a student club, the Music, Entertainment, and Sports Law Society. I took on a position as treasurer with them, and I did that for 2 years, actually.
Was it worthwhile?
Yeah, it was great. You get to be with a close-knit group of people, so socially it's great, but also it allows you to contribute a little bit to the school, which is one thing that I've always kind of tried to do wherever I've gone. Extracurricular activities have always been a large part of what I try to do.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So you make... Yeah, go ahead, Rish.
And what about your first year summers then?
So my first year summer, I utilized some personal contacts to basically get involved with a real estate investment trust. So I had the opportunity to work for an in-house counsel. Basically what my responsibility was, it was dedicated to conducting pretty much myself the due diligence for a very, very large acquisition that the company was making. It was valued at over $1 billion, the company that they were acquiring. And it covered about 180 properties. So it was an immense workload, and it was an experience that a lot of first-year students don't get exposed to because of the nature of the deal, and we're talking about serious business here.
Yeah.
And like this is essentially how business is run, right? A lot of students don't get exposed to that side of the business,
especially in first year. So.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a really, really great and useful experience.
And that was full time and paid.
Yeah. Yes,
nice.
It was.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're moving into second year. September drops. You're out of the real estate investment trust, and we're back into the academic swing. Mm-hmm. So how are things looking rolling into OCIs?
Stressful.
Yeah,
I get that's probably the best word that comes to mind. You hear from upper year students, the dreaded OCI process. Oh, you're getting ready for OCIs. OCIs are coming up. There's definitely an aura of stress, I think, around this idea of the OCI process.
Where does that stress come from, or where did it come from for you?
It's tough. I think it comes from a few different areas. It's will I get a job? That's probably the number one, but I think it goes deeper than that. Am I qualified to get a job? All these students that are around me, am I as good as them? Am I better than them? What qualifies me to get a job over them? So it's a lot of self-reflection and just overall like a ton of stress. How am I going to handle these interviews? I've never had a 17-minute interview before. Yeah. What's it going to be like? Am I going to get in the interviews, right? Yeah. There's all these questions that are going through your head.
Did you do anything in the summertime to prepare yourself for the OCI process, in the sense attending firm tours, meeting with people in different firms?
I personally did not. My thought was that I know what I bring to the table, and I'm confident in my abilities, and I think that will be enough to get me interviews and hopefully take that one step further and get a job. That was my thought going into OCIs. Mm-hmm. When OCIs actually came around, it was definitely more stressful than I had anticipated. because essentially, for those that don't know much about the OCI process, you basically have one day where you can schedule up to 20 interviews, let's say.
Yeah.
Each interview is about 17 minutes long. If you think about it, depending on how many interviews you have, that's a ton of preparation. You're meeting with 1 or 2 people for 17 minutes, and depending on, you can have a lot of interviews, you can have a few interviews. It's a lot of pressure.
So how many interviews did you line up for the OCI day?
I had 5 interviews for OCIs.
All right.
And so obviously that requires me to, you got to go out and do research on 5 different firms. You got to find out about, if you have the opportunity to find out about who you're interviewing with, you need to know a little bit about them. And you also need to know yourself, right? That's one thing that I think a lot of people probably tend to overlook. You need to know yourself. You need to know your resume inside and out, because you can get any question, right? This is not a formal process. They can ask you anything.
And these firms were mainly corporate firms, or they were diverse?
So these were mainly mid to large sized national firms offering a variety of sort of full service firms.
Okay. So let's blast the future just for a second. So how many in-firms did you get from those 5 OCIs?
From those 5 OCIs, I received 1 in-firm.
Right. So let's talk about the 4 interviews on OCI Day that you did not get in-firms from. So talk about them globally, pick them apart one by one. What was your impression? How'd they go?
That's actually one of the crazy things about OCIs, because obviously the day ends and you think back, okay, well, how did I do? How did this interview go? Or sometimes there's one specific thing that might stick out. Oh, I said this, but you know what? I really should have said this instead. It's a huge jumble of thoughts that go through your head at the end of the day. Constantly evaluating, how did I do? What did I do wrong? What didn't I do wrong? So for me, obviously, that's exactly what was going on in my head. The 5 interviews, I was thinking about, okay, well, how did this one go? And the general idea I had about each one was that, you know what? I thought they all went okay. I didn't feel bad about any of them. And in talking with some colleagues, it seemed like the general impression was everybody sort of felt that way.
Right.
Yeah, there were some people that knew, okay, maybe this interview didn't go particularly well. But for the most part, it seemed like everybody had that same general idea. Oh, yeah, you know what? It went okay. Which I think is understandable, right? Because you're dealing with people who are just as smart as you are, if not smarter. They have the same backgrounds, if not more diverse backgrounds than you. You're dealing with it's a competitive environment. And trying to pinpoint, what is it that I did that was really good, or what did I do that wasn't really good? Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to do. For me, I couldn't really think of anything that really stood out in terms of what I did wrong. So when I got the emails from those four firms saying, no, you know what, we're not going to be inviting you back, unfortunately, for in-firms, it's defeating because you think, oh, well, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? And a lot of times, you're not going to get that information. Firms aren't going to put in their email, oh, this is what you did wrong, or this is what you could have done better.
Did you reach out to any of those firms to get more feedback?
I didn't. But having said that, I think it's probably not a bad idea to do. However, once you get that email that says, you know what, no, we're not inviting you back, the only thing that's going through your head is, oh, well, I'm defeated. I feel like crap. It's tough to be able to transition from, oh, I'm so defeated, to, you know what, I want to reach out to them to figure out what I did wrong. Because there's a lot of emotions that are involved, for sure. So for me, I didn't reach out to anybody.
And you're not necessarily going to get an answer back anyway. Right?
But that's the thing, true.
They are very busy at that point of time too.
Right, and you have to also think about how many students these people are meeting with. They're not just meeting with your school, they're meeting with schools all across Ontario, even sometimes outside of Ontario. So just the influx of students that they're meeting with, the chances are they're not going to really remember your interview if you didn't get that next step passed on to you.
Yeah. So with the benefit of hindsight, you wouldn't have done anything differently in those 4 interviews?
Honestly, no. I don't think so. The only possible thing that I can think of that I would attempt to do differently is convey more confidence. And that, I think that's one thing that probably distinguishes people.
So how would you have done that?
It's tough, there's no real formula for just conveying confidence. It should hopefully come naturally, but it doesn't to everybody. Some people are more timid. Some people are more introverted. I think of myself along those lines.
Okay.
While others are really extroverted. And I think in this OCI process, those that are more extroverted, I think have a leg up. And just in speaking with colleagues and finding out, okay, who actually went to the next level, who got the infirms, who got the jobs, the trend, in my opinion, seemed like it was more extroverted people.
Mm-hmm. What kind of, when you were going through the actual OCI interviews, what kind of questions were you being asked? Were they mainly professional questions, or they were...
It was anything from A to Z. I had one which was really professional, really formal, where they said, talk about your experience at Wilfrid Laurier, talk about your experience at your summer job. And then I had one which said, no, talk to me about the Leafs. How do you like the Leafs? What do you think about their chances? Yeah. So it really ranges because, again, you can't really prepare for what questions are coming because it could range from really formal to really informal.
So there wasn't much of a distinction in your mind between how the interview went on OCI Day that you actually landed an infirm from and the other 4 that you didn't?
No. Honestly, no.
Okay. Yeah. So let's move forward to the infirm interview then. All right. How did you just describe the day? Describe the interview process itself. How did you feel it went?
So naturally, the theme of the week, I guess, is stress.
Yeah.
So you have another stressful process. You're walking into a firm. In most cases, they put you basically in a room with their existing students plus other students that are also interviewing.
Yeah. Was it a large firm, mid-sized?
This was a large firm. Okay. This was a large Bay Street firm. So I walk in, welcome, thank you for coming in. They put me into a room, a fairly large room. There's a spread of food, of course.
Yeah. Smoothies sometimes?
Yeah, there's a spread of food, water, coffee, all of the above.
Yeah.
Also in that room are their existing students, as well as students that are interviewing. Mm-hmm. So right off the bat, you have to start making an impression. You have to come in, and that almost was kind of scary, because you're not thinking right off the bat you're going to come in and have to put your game face on.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of times the thought is I'm going to walk into the firm, or I'm going to walk in wherever I'm interviewing, take a couple minutes to review my notes.
Yeah.
Make sure I'm on the right page. But no, you don't get that opportunity.
Yeah, it's not like being at the doctor's office.
No.
It's like you're not waiting in the lobby. It's like you're right into a social situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the best way to describe it.
You gotta turn it on, I think, as soon as you get in the elevator.
Yeah.
Because you'd be surprised who you're going to run into in the elevator.
Right. And for me, that was definitely scary because I felt right off the bat I was being judged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. They're starting to make judgment calls from the minute you walk in the door. Mm-hmm. And that's a scary process.
And this was Monday morning, I'm guessing?
Yeah, this was Monday morning.
Okay. So did you pick a couple people and just start small talk with your glass of water or whatever?
Yeah. So I got a glass of water. I walked over to some of the students and I just started talking to them.
Okay.
And to be honest, a lot of that felt very forced. Because what do? You can't just stand there. You have to start talking to somebody.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll walk over to you. Other times they'll stand where they are and they're expecting you to walk over. Like that's exactly what happened. I had one gentleman walked over to me and started a conversation with me. He then left to speak to somebody else. And I was left there standing. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I can't just sit here like standing by myself, right? I have to go speak to somebody. So then it was up to me to go walk over and talk to either existing students as well as other people that were interviewing.
So how long were you in that situation before somebody came and took you for your first interview?
That was about 20 minutes.
20 minutes?
About 20 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, and it's very stressful.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing is you're forced to talk to people that you were interviewing with, which sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I think that can go against you, because if you speak to somebody that's really extroverted and trying to sell themselves to you, you start thinking, oh, well, hold on a minute. Am I as good as this person? Right? And I think sometimes that's done on purpose to throw you off your game, because you're competing with so many other people for a limited set of jobs. And other times maybe it's not so purposefully done, but it's just an indirect effect of just what's going on.
Right.
So how many people did you actually end up meeting during your infirm, and how did you feel those interviews went?
So first off, the way it worked, I'm trying to remember now, the way it worked was that you basically had one person who was responsible for taking you around the firm and taking you to your interviews, basically. So in that respect, it's almost an interview within an interview, because you have all of these faces that are basically, again, I don't want to use the word, like, saying that they're judging you sounds negative. And I don't mean it to sound negative, but that's essentially
Maybe
what's
evaluating is probably a better word.
Yeah, I would say so. But the bottom line is somebody is watching your every move.
Yeah.
Everything that comes out of your mouth is being noted.
So how did you feel like your conversation flowed well in the interviews?
I did.
Themselves?
So the gentleman that was taking me around, I thought we had right off the bat, I thought we got along really well.
Yeah.
And this was an articling student?
This was an associate. This was an associate. So I thought I developed some rapport almost immediately with him. He then took me to my first interview of the day there, which was with a partner. Which again, it's almost like the same thing as OCIs. You don't quite know what's gonna happen, because for the most part, this is a fairly informal process. It's not like a formal interview that if you have interviewing experience, a lot of times it's very formal, and this is just totally throws all of that out the door.
Yeah.
So they ask you anything. Sometimes they're asking you about what you did over the summer. Sometimes they're just asking you about what kind of sports you play or what kind of hobbies you have.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's not necessarily about the answer that you give them, or what experience you have, or what you bring to the table, but they're evaluating the fit.
Yeah.
And that's that word that gets thrown around here in law school and law school interviewing. Fit. Nobody knows really what it is. Nobody can define it. There's no formal equation for fit. It's essentially a judgment call on the firm's end. Fit. They're looking for fit. Who will fit with the firm? And from the interviewees...
And I think that's not so much, and I think, so if fit had to do with two things, one being the individual themselves, and the other part being their experiences and their skills.
Right.
I think it's more so the individual themselves.
Absolutely.
Maybe like 70-30.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, at least 70-30, because what you have to remember, unfortunately, is that you're dealing with very competitive people. You're all in law school, right? So we're talking about like top 2% of educated people, right? Everybody is smart. Everybody has good experience. Everybody brings a lot to the table. Everybody is in a very good position to get a job.
Especially by the time you get to the infirms, everybody is pretty much on level playing field.
Right.
And at that point, I think maybe 90% comes down to just fit at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that.
So were there any moments during that infirm where you were like, God, this is not fitting? Or alternatively, that was really good. Like I really gelled with that person.
I thought all of my interviews went very well.
Okay.
I honestly did.
Yeah.
Each of the partners that I met with, I thought I built rapport right off the bat. I thought my answers were confident, and I thought I did a good job of communicating what I could bring to the firm.
Yeah.
The issue that I had was actually that night. So sometimes the firms will take students out for dinners. Other times they'll have a cocktail party, actually at the firm. And that was the case in this scenario. There was a cocktail party at the firm.
Okay.
So after a day of interviewing, I come back to the firm to this cocktail party.
Yeah.
Again, don't really know what to expect. Is it going to be a lot of people? Is it going to be a few people? Is it going to be in a huge room? Is it going to be in a small room? And the punchline is that it was not at all what I expected, naturally. Basically, they throw you into a tiny room which simply cannot hold the number of people that are there. So right off the bat, first off, you can't move because there's so many people in this little room.
Yeah.
But when you think about what you have to do in this situation, the whole point of the cocktail party is to mingle, right? You need to make impressions with as many people as possible. That's the whole point of it.
Yeah.
Because if you go there and you talk to one person, what's the point of going, right? There are multiple people on student committees, and it's your job as an interviewee to try and meet all of those people and make impressions with all of those people, because that's how eventually you're going to get a job.
Did you know before going to the reception who the student committee was and who you wanted to meet?
No.
No?
No, and the other thing is, again, there's just so many people. It's overwhelming. So you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, who do I go speak to, right? Do I need to go to that person or that person? It's all very overwhelming. So that was the first issue I had with this cocktail party. The second issue I had, it all felt very, very forced. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, while I was talking to people, I felt as though I had to put on a special face. Yeah. I had to act in a certain way that maybe wasn't myself. And the whole purpose of doing that, right, you're thinking, oh, well, I have to be on my best behavior, I have to act in a certain way so that I get this job. And you know, at the end of the day, if me being myself wasn't good enough, then it just was not meant to be. But I think trying to wrap your head around that, it's a tough thing, right? Because it's so competitive to get a job, and you're in your second year, and what am I going to do if I don't get a job?
Yeah.
So you put on this facade, and it all ultimately felt very forced to me.
And how long were you there for the reception?
About an hour and a half.
Okay.
About an hour and a half.
It's pretty long.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself speaking with a variety of people?
I spoke to a number of people.
Yeah.
But as I said, it was a very huge issue trying to get around the room because it was so packed, right? But you have to get around the room. So it's really difficult.
Yeah.
Because I would have thought, in knowing that students are trying to mingle as best they can and get around the room, they would have made the environment more conducive to that, as opposed to basically throwing you in a can like sardines, which is how I felt.
Yeah.
And so even taking, a step back, after your 3 interviews that you had during the infirms, when they were done, did you hear from anybody, or did they say anything about the next day?
They didn't say anything about the next day, but they invited me back to the cocktail party, and they said, I really hope you come to the cocktail party.
Yeah.
So in hearing that, I felt good. I felt some sort of sense of almost entitlement, almost. Yeah. That, you know what, they're saying this to me. Maybe I actually have a job. Maybe I have a chance at this.
Yeah.
When in actual fact, I think they were just saying that to everybody. So it's, I don't know. It's a very emotional process to be totally honest. There's a lot of running emotions going on and jumbled emotions.
So it's Wednesday, it's call day, it's 5 p.m., it's 5:03, it's 5:05, you don't get a call. What's going through your mind?
So I am just going to backtrack, actually. I knew before Wednesday came around that I did not get the job.
Really?
After the cocktail party, I spoke to, I want to say it was the head of the student committee.
Yeah.
And she had mentioned to me the next steps that would take place, and those were as follows. The student committee and a number of the partners would be meeting after the cocktail party. And you got to remember, this is like 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Right? So they're meeting and they're making these decisions from like 11 to 1 a.m. And she had relayed the fact that after they made their decisions, they would be emailing candidates pretty much that night to have some people back the next day or some people possibly back on Wednesday. Mm-hmm. So it was actually Monday night. I got home from the cocktail party and I'm watching my phone. I'm sitting there nervous. My nerves are shot, totally shot, and I'm just praying that I get an email. Mm-hmm. 1 o'clock rolls around and I still don't have an email. So I think to myself, you know what? Maybe they just couldn't get it all done in one night. You think about it. There's like over 100 people that they have to evaluate. It was already 11 o'clock after I left. They can't possibly do this all. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to go to bed. I'll try to refresh and we'll figure this out the next day. I think it was about like a half hour, 45 minutes after I went to bed. I saw my phone vibrate. I looked, it was 1:45 in the morning. Mm-hmm. An email basically saying, thanks for coming in. Sorry, you don't have the job. Oh. That was the essence of it. In other words, it was the PFO. I'm not going to explain what the PFO is. If you know what it is, you'll get what I'm talking about.
Did you, after your interns and after the cocktail party, did you send any emails, thank you emails or anything?
Absolutely. Yeah. I sent an email to that person, the head of the student committee. I sent an email to all the partners that I met with, as well as the gentleman that was responsible for basically taking me around. Mm-hmm.
And did you get any replies from them?
One.
One?
Only one of 5 people responded.
That's not atypical, though. I mean, I feel as though, again, they're just super busy, right? And they're getting dozens and dozens of emails, so...
Right, okay. But at the same time with that, like you think, if you put in 2 seconds, 2 minutes to write this email, I think they should have, I don't know, I think they should be responding.
Yeah, there's certainly a professional courtesy there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like, in understanding what these students are going through, I think they should sort of recognize that and just... regardless of whether or not you got the job, just return an email. You know what? Thanks for coming in. Had a really great time with you. Just I'm sorry that it turned out the way it did. Right. Something as simple as that.
Yeah.
So at 5 o'clock, you weren't holding your breath on Wednesday.
No.
But how did you feel on Tuesday? I guess after you got that email Monday night.
Yeah.
Defeated.
Yeah.
Incredibly defeated. It's not a good feeling, right? You get that rejection and. Rejection always stings.
Yeah.
It's universal. Nobody likes rejection.
Yeah.
But in this sense, I think it might have been expanded a little bit, that rejection, or inflated. Here you are, you're a second-year law student. There's this aura around second-year jobs. Oh, everybody, you need to get a second-year job or else you won't get an articling job. Right, that's the thought that kind of goes through your head, and that's what you hear from a lot of people. So the immediate aftermath is, oh man, what am I going to do? I don't have a job at a law firm. I'm not going to get an articling job. What am I possibly going to do? I'm screwed. Like, there's just so many different things that are going through your head. But the gist of it is defeat.
Yeah.
Morally, physically, mentally, emotionally, you're just defeated. You're exhausted. And I think it's a natural feeling that comes with it.
Absolutely. So you start to swallow the pill.
Yeah.
You go back, you finish up second year, pour yourself back into your academics, but inevitably you're in these social situations where some of your friends have jobs,
right.
Others don't. People are talking about their positive experiences from OCIs.
Right.
So how do you feel in those situations?
So, putting myself back into the shoes of me in second year after OCIs, some people have jobs, some people don't. I think I was able to get over that defeat relatively quickly. The reason for that was that because my understanding or thought process was, you know what? It's not the end of the world. It's only a second-year job. I still have plenty of opportunities to do what I'm going to want to do. Mm-hmm. And not everybody gets second-year jobs. It's a really competitive process. There are tons of people that were in the same exact situation that I was in. Lots of people don't have jobs come second-year summer. So my thought process was, you know what? It just wasn't meant to be. It was not meant to be because, you know what? Looking back at how I felt the cocktail party was so forced and the facade that I had to put on, my thought was, if I had to do that for a whole summer, it wouldn't have worked out.
Yeah.
I would not have lasted. So I'm a strong believer in things happen for a reason, and that things will work themselves out. Whether or not that's a valid philosophy, I don't know.
I think it's
but
completely
it's my
valid.
philosophy.
I think it's a healthy philosophy. Yeah.
So that philosophy helped me kind of get over the admitted defeat. And in talking with my colleagues who did have jobs, again, just trying to keep that philosophy in the back of my mind, that's what got me through. If this person has a job, great. You know what? That was meant to happen for you.
Yeah.
But it wasn't meant to happen for me at this point in time.
And that's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's a really tough thing to swallow.
Yeah.
Right? Not everybody can handle it like that.
Especially when your exams are coming right around the corner
Right.
by the time you get back.
Yeah.
Did you try any other processes? Because there are a couple other processes that happen after the Toronto OCI. Did you?
Right.
part of
So
those?
after that, I basically reached out to my position that I had in the previous summer, and I was lucky enough that they agreed to have me back. Mm-hmm. So I was still in a decent position. I was still doing legal work. It just wasn't at a law firm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or I had the opportunity to do legal work. Different sort of legal work, but I had a job, right?
Yeah.
And regardless, even with those people that didn't have a job like I had, that wasn't law related, it's still only your second year summer, right? We know as law students that we're going to be working hard for a very long time. And knowing that, I think it's important to try and understand that your time in law school and your time of limited working is in fact limited. So trying to do something that's going to allow you to enjoy your summer before you actually have to really get into the nitty-gritty of being a lawyer, I think is something that a lot of people probably don't necessarily think about. So for those students that don't have a job, my advice would be, look, to try and enjoy your second year summer, right? Because you know you're going to have to bunker down eventually.
So you go through, finish up your academics. How did the academics go second year? Better or worse than first year?
Pretty much on par, I think.
Yeah.
I think on par. It's not quite as transitional as first year. Right, first year you're dealing with a lot of new stuff.
You know the playing field a little bit better, but you have more things to deal with job applications.
More stress with all the recruitment processes and whatnot too.
Okay, so you go back to the Real Estate Investment Trust second year summer. You're working there full-time, paid again, right?
Yep.
Doing law work, but not in the environment that you would ideally like to be doing it in.
Right.
Nonetheless, so now you are going to apply for articling positions during the application process in summer.
Right.
So you put those applications in. How many places did you apply to?
So I actually only applied to about 10 places. So one of the reasons for that was because, as I've mentioned, I have a pretty strong idea of what it is that I want to do. And I don't necessarily want to give up on that or just give in to doing something for the sake of getting a job. So when that time came around to to do those applications and to submit those applications, my thought process was, you know what, I'm going to apply to the places that practice in areas that I'm interested in, which, to be honest, there were not a lot. There were not a lot of business or corporate type jobs, specifically because, as you guys know, all of the large Bay Street firms had already done their recruitment, or they weren't externally recruiting because they were taking all of their internal summer students. Those are the students that get first crack, as you guys know. So your options were really limited. There were not a lot of jobs or opportunities, in my opinion, in this articling process. And I didn't want to just apply to everything for the sake of applying. Yeah. Now, looking back, I might change that philosophy. If I had to redo this all over again, I would apply to more places. Because I don't think I quite understood just how difficult it is out there. And there is a lot of talk about the state of the profession in terms of outgoing law students and how difficult it is to get a job. But having done that and seeing it, there's a much better understanding of actually how difficult it is.
There's a reality to the story now.
Right. And a sad reality.
So how many interviews did you get with your articling applications?
I got 2 interviews.
Okay.
2 interviews on, I want to say 10 applications. It might have been even less than that.
How did those interviews go?
That was, again, you come in with a better understanding of how they're going to go because you've done OCIs. So you know that the interviews are going to be somewhat informal. You can't really plan what kind of questions you're going to get, but you have to know that you have to go in with confidence, know yourself, know your resume, because any question can be possible. And also understanding that you're going to be interviewing with very competitive people, and people that are just as smart and just as experienced, if not more experienced. People bring a wide diversity and diverse background to the table. Having that in the back of my mind, I think allowed me to go in a little bit more confident than I was in OCIs. But again, one of the issues that I had in planning those interviews was you don't really know how many interviews you're going to get on that interview call day, right? So your thought process is, okay, call day is coming up. 9 a.m. or 8:30 a.m. on whatever day it was, you're thinking, okay, I hope to get as many interviews as I possibly can. And what you're thinking of in your head is, okay, well, how do I schedule all these interviews that are going to come in? It's a tough thing to do if you don't know what interviews are coming in.
So in this case, for the articling, you didn't get the emails ahead of time like you would in the
I only had one email ahead of time.
Okay.
So I honestly was not sure what would be coming in.
Yeah.
So I got the first call at right on the dot, 8:59, turned 9 p.m. There's a call. So I proceeded to try and schedule that for one time. I got the next call. So I waited, I think I scheduled about 2 hours in between. I figured the first call had said I would be there for 1 hour. They explicitly said over the phone that I would be in the office for 1 hour.
Yeah.
It was uptown, so I figured, okay, you know what, I can get to my next interview relatively quickly. If I leave an hour in between the end of my first interview and the start of my second interview, that should be fine. Because I didn't want to separate them too far, just in case more calls came.
You're getting the impression that it wasn't fine.
No, not at all. But that original planning of the schedule, you're thinking in your head, well, if more interviews come, then I need to schedule them. You want to schedule them all on the first day, right?
Yeah, good approach. I would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
However,
so you go to that first interview?
Yeah.
I was late.
The first interview comes around. An hour goes by. I'm still there. An hour and a half goes by. I'm still there.
And this is your meeting, variety of people one after the next?
Yeah, meeting.
Good conversations. You feel like it's flowing well.
I thought it was a little dry, but I think that was just the nature of the firm. Mm-hmm. It was a smaller firm, very small firm, focused in real estate, which is one of the interests that I had. and it was I think it was just very informal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just the nature of the firm, right? It's not a Bay Street firm, so there's no swag factor, there's no flashiness. So I think it was just the nature of the firm.
Yeah.
So here I am, it's an hour and a half later, an hour and 45 minutes later.
Wow.
And I'm thinking to myself, well, hold on a minute. They said I was only supposed to be here for an hour. The fact that I'm still here is a really good sign that they want me to meet more people.
Yeah.
However, I have an interview in 20 minutes.
Oh my God.
And it was an interview with the firm that I was really, really interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So here I am. I'm starting to panic because I'm at this one firm. I don't want to screw up this interview, but at the same time, I have my hopes set really on this second interview.
So what'd you do?
I tried to get out of there diplomatically, as professionally as possible, and that's a tough thing to do, because if you show that you want to get out of there, to them you're kind of showing them that you're not interested. So it's a balancing factor. You have to prove to them that, you know what, I am really interested in this job. But at the same time, you have to understand that I have multiple interviews. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that the firms should understand and they should recognize. They shouldn't put that against students. And I feel like in my situation, that's what ended up happening. I communicated my interest. I'll be honest. I'll tell you. I'll say exactly what I said. I said, look, I'm really interested. I am down to your firm and one other firm. I have an interview that I need to get to, but I'm 100% interested. And if you can communicate that to the person that was responsible for emailing me, it'd be great. And it seemed like the person that I was interviewing with at the time understood. Mm-hmm. But eventually, even still, you feel just weird.
Yeah, so having that conversation with them, especially when you're interviewing.
It's a tough conversation to have.
So you get out of there and you blast down back downtown.
I'm like, my nerves are just, again, my nerves are shot. I'm freaking out.
You're sweating on the TTC.
Yeah, big time. Like, oh man, I'm going to be late to this interview.
And did you arrive late?
I didn't. I literally arrived on the dot.
Good. And how did that go to the firm?
There was a mix-up there, because to be safe, I called and said there's a possibility that I might be late, because I didn't want to just show up late unannounced, right? Yeah. I wanted to cover my ground, which I thought would be a good idea to do. So I get there, I end up getting there actually on time.
Yeah.
And I think there was some sort of mix-up because they thought I arrived late, so I ended up sitting there for about half an hour until somebody came to interview me. When somebody came to interview me, it ended up being the second interviewer. And at the start of that interview, she said, oh, well, I understand that you've already met with so-and-so. And I said, oh, but no, I actually haven't yet. This is my first interview. And you could tell she just had no idea. Wow. So there was a very serious communication fail.
Who did you call to let them know that you possibly might be late?
Just one of the secretaries.
Yeah.
But again, I actually ended up arriving on time. I went in there. I said here I am, Steven Birken, checking in. Yada yada. So eventually they figured it out. I ended up meeting with that first person.
Yeah.
Ended up meeting with the second person who I was originally supposed to meet with. I then met with a third person. All the interviews went very, very well.
Okay.
Very, very well. I was really confident. They communicated to me that the interview went very, very well. Right off the bat, they said, we want you to come in the following day for another interview.
Sweet.
So I'm feeling great. Okay, excellent. I don't hear anything from the first firm that night. I send emails regardless, thanking them for having me in, communicating my interest again, but I don't hear anything. So I think, okay, you know what? fine. Maybe that's not how they do things because they are really small. Maybe they approach the process a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
So Tuesday rolls around. I go back into the firm that I was invited back to, and it was a much different atmosphere. It was that next round, right?
Yeah.
Even more competitive because they've now narrowed it down. And I'll give you stats because I think stats are probably important to understand for students that are eventually going to go through this. They communicated that they had received 600 applications and they were only hiring 3 people. Right? That's a tough pill to swallow.
I'm shaking my head. You can't hear that, but
that's
disbelief.
That's the state that the profession is in.
But I mean, you're still on the second day of interviews, right? Like,
right.
You're like way ahead of the curve
right.
here.
So here I am. They've narrowed it down to, I don't know, let's call it 40 people.
Right.
From the original 100. I'm in that group of 40 people. Right. I feel some sense of accomplishment. Yeah, I made it this far. Like this is great. From 600 people, here I am.
Yeah.
Right. And trying to keep that in my mind and the same strategy that I had in the first day, which is to convey as much confidence as possible, show them that I know my stuff and that I'm prepared to work and that I know what I bring to the table, all of that. And it was a different interviewing experience because the second day they ended up interviewing with 2 people at a time instead of 1 person at a time.
Yeah.
So here I am. I met with 2 people. I don't want to go too much into the details of what went on with that, but they interviewed very differently than the first group, than the first day. The first day was very informal. Everybody was really nice. This group of gentlemen were a little bit more forceful. It was much more of a formal process, a formal interview. A lot of behavioral questions. So, like, tell me about a time when X. How did you do this? Or what would you have done in this situation? You could tell that they were trying to not throw you off, but they were trying to grill you to see how you could handle the pressure.
Yeah.
That was a tough thing because it wasn't was not what I was expecting. That being said, I think I handled it very well. I then went to a second group of people to interview with. Also, that was very informal and it seemed like they were almost uninterested in what was going on. Ended up getting an email a few hours later basically saying, again, thanks for coming in. Sorry it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And that was that.
So, same kind of feeling after getting the OCI responses?
Worse. Significantly worse. Just because I knew how good the first day had gone.
Yeah.
Right? And it wasn't just a feeling. It wasn't just me telling myself, oh, that went really well. I was told it went very, very well. And having been told that and it ending up the way it did, again, was incredibly off-putting. But this is how a lot of the big street firms work, right? It's just they're so huge, and they have these difficult decisions to make, and it's very subjective, very subjective.
Yep.
So here I am. I'm incredibly defeated to the point where I'm thinking, is this what I want to do?
Wow.
Is this what I want to do?
Yeah.
Right? And that's a tough thing to think about when you're in that situation, right? You're going into your 3rd year of law school. You've already spent all this money on law school, and you have that thought: is this what I want to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, is this industry telling me something? Like, am I not in line?
Is this meant to be, or I really not?
That is a scary, scary thought, but it's a thought that I think a lot of people face, just because of how hard it is to get a job, and that's the reality. There are not as many jobs as there needs to be.
Yeah.
Students are coming out, and there's just the amount of students that are coming out, there's not enough jobs for them. That's as simple as it is.
So now you're back in third year, or even after the interview, you had some summer left. So what are some steps that you're taking now to line up that articling position, and how are you going through that process?
So now it's really on me, and it's on the person to try and figure out what the next steps are, because nobody's gonna just hand you a job, right? That's not how this works.
There are no more application processes left.
No, there's one formal application process. That's it. Then there's just this ongoing kind of continuing process.
Make your own connection.
Right. So it's networking. It's using any and all possible contacts you have. I'm talking to my parents. I'm talking to my siblings. I'm talking to friends. I'm talking to family. Just trying to figure out, do you know anybody? And that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
It's a very tough process, because you have to be proactive, right? And a lot of people, for a lot of people, it's not easy to do that. But again, nobody's just going to say, oh, hey, you know what? Here, we're hiring. Why don't you come in?
Yeah.
That's really not how it's going to work. Yes, the school has some resources. So most schools have some sort of career services or directory that they have where they will post jobs as they hear about them. But they're not going out there and trying to figure out where students can get a job. They have some sort of understanding with other Ontario schools that when one firm goes to one school, all the schools will tell each other about it, and they'll post a job. But it's now October, it's still very early. Because if you think about it, if firms were going to be hiring now, or if firms were hiring in September, why wouldn't they have just gone through the formal process that took place in August?
Yeah.
And that's the reality, right? No firms are really hiring at the moment because it's still so close to the formal process that just went on. And the fact of the matter is that the remaining firms that may be hiring are all smaller. And so they might not have assessed their needs yet, right? A lot of that doesn't happen until, let's say, January, February, March, April, right? A lot of times, students aren't even hearing about opportunities until it's well closer to August, to the starting point of articling, right? But the fact of the matter is that there are a ton of people that are in the exact same situation that I am. And that's one thing that I've tried to keep in the back of my head to get me through this process. It's not just me that doesn't have a job. It's not just me that's going through this by myself. There's so many people. I would go so far as to say is 50% of law students are probably in this situation at the moment. Where's that number come from? I have no idea. Just speaking with people and knowing...
Yeah, it's your impression, right?
Knowing what's going on in the profession, right? That's what it seems. To give you some stats, the career services relayed to me that for this year, 400 students signed up for the LPP, which is the law practice program. There's roughly 1,600 outgoing law students every year. Let's say this year there's about 1,600. You have 400 of 1,600 in this LPP process. That's a high number of students.
Yeah.
Right? That's an immense number of students without jobs. And that just doesn't cover all the students without jobs. Because, right, think about the people that don't have jobs aren't necessarily doing the LPP. Some people might just say, you know what, I'm abandoning law and just go do something else.
Some people find an articling job throughout third year before August. Yeah.
Right. Some people just decide to find any work they can before trying to do this process all over again. So that 400, I don't think, is a complete representation of everybody that didn't have a job after their third year.
Yeah.
I would say it's more like 500, even like 550. When you think about 550, 500, whatever it is, of 1,600 students, that's insane.
And also the 1,600, or the ones that get jobs, they're not just in Toronto. There's a lot that go nationally to other cities. So if you're just looking for jobs in Ontario, the numbers might be even worse.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good reality for people to recognize. So law school presents you a lot of opportunities. I think it's important to state that not every program gives you the opportunity to interview with some of the best employers in the country. Not every program has those recruiters coming to your school and interviewing people, and we should be grateful for that, to have those opportunities. But at the same time, a law degree is not a golden ticket to work in a major legal market.
Not at all.
Not at all. It's a tough market at this point in time.
Yeah. And I think that's a nice place to wrap it up. Steve, that was epic, man. I think that's gonna resonate with a lot of people, and it's really important to share that story.
Thanks a lot, man.
No problem. I'll just have a couple final words
of
advice, because I know that there's a lot of students that are in my position, and there will be a lot of students that eventually will be in the same situation for the lower years that are coming up. It's important to remember that there are other people going through the same thing that you're going through. It's not just you. You're not alone. And while there's this sense of defeat, you have to remember, right? My philosophy, things happen for a reason.
Yeah. Things
will work themselves out. It's not just you, and I think it's important to try and self-reflect in whatever you thought might have gone wrong and what you can do better. But ultimately, it's just important to know that you are going through this with a lot of other people, and that's what the state of the industry is in.
Nice.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
This is the Law School Show.